basically what Jethro told Moses what to do.
We stand with the Bundys. We are Americans that believe in smaller government. We are Americans who believe in the Constitution. We're Americans who believe that the 10th Amendment ultimately says what it means, and it's that those powers not given to the federal government remain with the states. And you need to know that those are the principles that the Bundys are standing on. And before we talk for just a moment, yeah, let's give them a hand. Before we go into it's going to be very short. There are the stars tonight, and I just want to go through and set the stage. Cliven and his wife have 14 children. Ammon Bundy is number 3. And we saw him do a lot of things that got national media attention, but I want you to know that many of those other children stood up in areas where it was very tough and were persecuted to a large degree for standing up where they stood. It just so happened that Ammon Bundy was involved in a face-off that was captured to a degree by the media. You had individuals there with their cell phones that captured this. You know that Ammon Bundy was tased 3 different times by the BLM. I want to show you what courage looks like. I just want to show you this video quickly for those of you who have not seen it, and I'm going to stop it in a few places just to talk for a moment. Let me set the stage for this video. The Bundys are obviously concerned with the BLM going on their property. Their attention is drawn to about 14 vehicles moving in a caravan off of their property. They had no idea that they were on their property, at least in this area. And so Ammon takes off on his quad into the area of this caravan that is leaving the property. They believe that their cattle are being killed, and they also believe that they might be destroying property. They have a backhoe that's in line with this caravan, and they also have a big dump truck. Ammon wants to know what's in that dump truck. And so what you're going to see in this video is him placing that quad in between the street and the truck so the truck can't get out of there. He wants answers. First of all, he wants them gone, but first he wants to know what's in that truck. So let's take a look.
Could I speak to a supervisor? I have an important concern. I'm not bullshit. Could I speak to a supervisor? Sir? Could I speak with a supervisor?
What you'll see right up here, I don't know if you can see it, that's the leg of Cliven Bundy's sister, Ammon Bundy's aunt, who's just been thrown to the ground. Just been thrown to the ground by the BLM. Okay? There she is. Down to the ground here. And you'll see Ammon show up here in just a moment. Yes. Right here is the quad. Ammon is right here, getting off and getting ready to confront the BLM. And watch it from here.
Hey, throw down my hand. Listen to me. You stay right with me. You stay right with me. Throw down my hand. Listen to me. Listen to me. You stay right with me, okay? Huh? Who's the aggressor here? Who's the aggressor? Let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. Yeah, don't give me that attack.
Yeah. So there you saw Cliven Bundy being tasered 3 different times. What I find amazing, those of you that have ever seen someone being tased, what generally happens to them?
They lay down on the ground.
They go to the ground. He was tased 3 times and was phased to a degree but never went to the ground, came back and continued to confront. Yeah, this is, I believe, what courage looks like. Now, if we could go, let's see here if we can. I want to outline, and I'm going to let them tell the story. But I always ask Ammon if I can tell that story because I don't know that he would do it justice because he's a humble man who felt as though this was the moment he had to stand. He felt it inside of him in his heart and his mind that he felt he had to stand at that moment in time, and he did just that. Let's talk about the grounds that they're standing on constitutionally. There are 2 very important sections in the Constitution that speak to property. Let's look at Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. It says this: the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. So territories, that is prior to a specific geographic region becoming a state, the federal government has unlimited authority essentially over that territory. But that also mentions other property belonging to the United States. See, we're not having that discussion, and the media didn't want to talk about that. When we say other property belonging to the United States, what do we mean? We have to answer that question. Why? Because the U.S. Constitution is one of positive powers. When we say that the Constitution is one of positive powers, what do we mean? We mean this: the federal government can only do those things that the Constitution specifically tells it that it can do. Right? In other words, you can't have a federal government that says, well, we can do anything we want so long as the Constitution says we can't do it, we'll stay away from it. But other than that, we can do anything we want. Wrong. Article 1, Section 8, for example, enumerates the specific powers that belong to the legislative branch. And if you do not find a power enumerated in the Constitution with respect to the legislative branch, they can't do it. It's that simple. So Article 4, Section 3 talks about territories, and more than that, it talks about other property. What is the other property that the federal government is permitted to own or control? It tells us in Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8, remember, those are the 18, 20 enumerated powers, depending on how you read it. It's about 20 enumerated powers. It says, Congress shall have power to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. I defy anybody to show me anything in the Constitution that allows the federal government to control property outside of the 2 provisions I just showed you. Well, let me step back for just a moment. We didn't talk, for example, about post offices. Post offices are provided for. But this is sort of capturing all of that here in Article 1, Section 8 as we move towards the end of those provisions. So this is telling the federal government, you can legislate and you can control property pertaining to these things. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why is it that the federal government controls or claims they own 50% of the property in Arizona, in excess of 80% of the property in Nevada? How do they do that? See, we just assume that that's the way it is because they've been doing it for so long. And what the Bundys have done is says, enough is enough. Enough is enough. We are not going to pay money to the federal government. Why? Because they don't have the authority to take our money. The state has the authority, potentially. We might argue that a little bit later on. But if anybody has authority, it's the state government. So Governor of Nevada, why aren't you standing up? Sheriff of Clark County, why aren't you standing up and enforcing the Constitution? So I would urge you as you start to have this discussion, because the media has not told the whole story, as you have this discussion, make this a discussion about the rule of law. That's really what it comes down to. To make my case even further, this is going to be the last thing I talk about before I turn it over to Ammon. It's this. What I'm telling you right now was actually endorsed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1845 in the case of Fuller v. Hagar. Here's what it says. This was a dispute that really began with Alabama as they became a state that was just admitted into the Union. And here's what it says. If an express stipulation had been inserted into the agreement granting the municipal right of sovereignty and eminent domain to the United States, such stipulation would have been void and inoperative. Why? Because the United States have no constitutional authority to exercise municipal jurisdiction, sovereignty, or eminent domain within the limits of a state or elsewhere, except in the cases in which it was explicitly granted. The Supreme Court saying, wait a second, the only authority you guys have to exercise control and jurisdiction over land is in those areas where the Constitution permits you to do those things.